Our guest is Matt Jasper, who's a wonderful friend and a wonderful poet. And what we have, and you know what? I have such a hard time finding a bio for Matt, but let me tell you, Matt had a book out a while ago. So I'm just going to say, like, it was, Matt's book was blurbed by some people. Now, if you can go back to when this book came out, listen to these names. It will take you back. Donald Revel, Pagan Kennedy. Now that's a name from the past. Tao Lin, a name from the past. Lisa Carver, and Franz Wright. And we'll talk a little about Franz Wright when we do the Q&A because Franz and I kind of go back too. So anyway, I'm really looking forward. Matt's been called a genius uh, recently, which is awesome. And his poems are unique. They are wonderful and they make you think. And let me just turn it over to Matt Jasper. Oh no, and I just hit the wrong Matt. I just muted you, so if you can unmute because I'm doing everything
Good
wrong
start.
today.
I
All
love it.
right.
I love it. So I'll just read poems, I guess, right? And then someone
Yes.
will stop. Excellent. Uh, questionnaire. Who was Paracelsus, true or false? And why must we now be miserable? Because of he who plucked wings from seraphim, battled fawns and woodland creatures, then carved his features onto their, of course, adoring faces, arrayed to beam joy back at him. His own joy, really, for he'd swallowed their souls along with adding stirrups, bits, collars tightened like tourniquets to constrict whatever blood could course through, and defy one so wry as to have believed that poisons come from some star's alignment with humors both aqueous and vitreous, sublime and corrupt. He prayed back at them from a spire he built to ward off snipers. It was the opposite of a guard tower. He'd stand there all day painting targets on his bare chest and sobbing that no one thought him important enough to take out. Then there were the cassowaries he himself made flightless when he formed their feathers from clay. Thank God, he also formed the bipeds that way, and laughed at Ostrogoths sweeping across plains with brooms instead of horses, feeling all Theodoric until the Byzantines rounded up some modern rod and gun clubs who answered yes on the survey. They would like to go back and claim some ancestral land, which is exactly what they did. They cut perfect squares of sod from Balkan earth in 4 AD, then teleported back to modern-day Newark, New Jersey, hell-bent on perfect lawns, stumbling spawn, the yawn of a sinkhole forming beneath them, the unbeknownst content meekly to inherit the earth again and again, blind to the evidence gathered by the public eye, carefully changing strategy now to stop what he'd been doing and crawl down from his tower to paint the targets on them. So, that made sense. All right. And then here's one called Shock. There is a limit to pain, then we are taken away. It's merciful to not be fully here at this departing deathbed scene or interview for the position of standing upright and breathing air behind some cash register drawer, opening its morgue slab containing dead presidents who set poor precedents by predeceasing paper selves they could have spent their whole lives with, extravagantly planting seeds of trees and kisses on cheeks of ladies or men in the Lincoln bedroom where Swain is groomed this side of entombment, so there's less reason to scoff. When the head is blown off, just rewind the film through the Monroe scenes and say at least he had a pretty good run. Before gunfire triangulates or assassin jumps down from balcony, before a wounded knee, before a secretary can type Chappaquiddick, we are mostly getting old and sick at varying rates. We pay and pay to get well again, so we can see old friends propped up by Viagra and canes, trembling with Parkinsonism, yet somehow slicked with the jisms of youth, as the near toothless read Sex by Prescription on the beach, tastefully hiding cover from the young, gathering sea sponges and horseshoe crabs, and of course a conch shell they can take home the ocean's roar with, because shock is like holding that shell to an ear. The ocean roars though it is nowhere near. Skin grows clammy as low tide, pulse races weakly on through though gulls cry, and pupils widen when the contest is lost. Dissociation is a vacation of sorts. They have hiking, biking, and water sports at the lodge that's a mirage one sees when being is eclipsed by nips of anxiety or the pressure of a loved one's lips, breathing air into lungs, expunging all record you were ever here, maybe talking you down from an anxiety attack. Some have seen the sun extinguished by scattering absolutely all of its light to sparkle in the waves. Whether well attended by a lover or friend or even the shell of your own speaking, only a voice that has seen how it all blew apart then came together can bring you back again. And here's one about missionaries. Amaxosa. The green lawn goes wild in anticipation of its meal of weary travelers, setting down their burdens, dismissing servants once the tents are set. So what if they left a long trail of wasted service animals and exploited indigenous peoples? They will erect bells and steeples to celebrate their inebriated swagger across God's continent. True, some have leishmaniasis puffing up a huff of lips that spatter and blow infection to Christ's novitiate brides, all prospective widows, though some may ripen and fall away to lay open the way for new heirs to this land. The lawn has other plans. It gasps that it was mown, yet severed stalks of its own ripening already have their seeds at work beneath the bold pioneers. The seeds sing to the few who have ears for it, a threnody that lulls before this garden's expulsion of every Adam's Eve who dared eat the fruits of heavenly fathers in a blather to cement their hold upon popular imagination mistranslated. There is no word here for salvation. The word for wind will be taken and given back as spirit to the devil's children who have deciphered the seed song and are quietly backing away before their land and cattle can be confiscated and they can be forced to wear tin plates around their necks indicating chief and tribe. The seeds sing their future and show what to do when ruination poses as a better life. Simply open it to sun or even moonlight and let the shoots pass through sinews quickly as the weary sleep, needing not even stakes pounded, just sprouts of vegetation to so tight the thumping drums of their hearts, and translate the lawn back into its longer form as grass, once disturbed by a passing breeze. So, and here's a short poem about my daughter that I wrote when she was 3. Oh yeah, and that's my blood sugar alarm going off. I love that thing. So, Eudora, she sets a tea for seen and unseen guests, empty chairs and stuffed pets. She pours and talks from place to place. By way of apology to the Easter Bunny, she says, and Grandpa Whitty will be here too, when he stops being dead. She sort of sneers that last line, rolls her eyes and shifts her hips as if she's bored and 17. Yes, death is a minor inconvenience that keeps one from attending tea parties, until by special excavation they are cordially invited. Those who in their poor taste died before Eudora could turn 3 must attend unendingly, must bend, must bow, must drink their tea. And this one's called Garden. They are under the real sky for the first time, reaching to feel each other's dangling stars, cut paper edges. Sorry, I'm going to read that again because I think I invented a new word for it because my blood sugar's a little off. Garden. They are under the real sky for the first time, reaching to feel each dangling star's cut paper edges. This is what it will be like to die, she realizes, but doesn't tell him when her reaching gives nothing back to her but air. He knows he made each blade of grass, the moon, and realistic clouds he set to graze like sheep upon gray field turned pure white where eaten. She and he, the sky, the sheep would never die, he knew. Or if they did, there would always be something even now they were beginning to change into. What shape was next, vexed not fleecy moon or grass of sky, yet only wrecked him when he saw her exhalations of moss to cover bare earth, her tears welling also to raise eruptions of narcissi, anurca ferns, and modest field grass. These were all of her stages she had stepped down from, knowing how to number every nerve and sin, send infinities of her skin to him, reach from the painted cathedral mural of her hand at the very beginning of creation. It was almost too late when she saw that he thought himself a god of sorts, not in his body, yet with his thought that he could will them from other lives into this one, of the weather never changing arrangements made by lovers, pinning bliss on some turn of body or calendar page coded with times for their next assignation, in a world of intention carried out, a budget for props, enduring warmth, yet her wisdom enough to sigh at his protestations of immortality.
All right. Let's stop you right there, because I guess that's my role as host, to stop the
Stop,
future.
stop it.
So yeah, that was a wonderful reading, man. And I was really taken aback by the versatility of your work. For example, your first poem was so much different than your last poem. Were they written around the same time? And if not, is there a way that you can sort of describe the difference and why you go different places and different forms and different styles?
Oh,
There's six questions in there. Just pick one.
wow, wow. Well, yeah, that's a great question. It's such a great question. The uh, the the first and the last poem you
Yes.
were asking about. Yeah, yeah. The first one was probably written only about uh, a year or less. It's written the same year as the last one, and those are all sort of modern era because I sort of have early poems where I was young and promising, and then I squandered all my promise, and then I was I was busy raising seven kids and working too much, and also had like a head injury equivalent in there for a while. So I stopped writing for almost 20 years as sort of a
Wow.
practice, and and have gotten back to it in the last couple of years. And so those are both they seem like yesterday, just part of this time where I can just wake up and just write stuff down. And usually I wake up. Sorry.
Do you need to have orange juice or something?
Yeah. No, I prefer it this way because I actually low blood sugar induced hallucinations are part of my writing routine. I
No
like to
kidding.
oh yeah, I like to crank down to about 45 and let the mild hallucinations mix in with whatever, and it's even better if it's morning because in the morning when I just can stumble out of a dream and start writing, if I look at my blood sugar monitor and it's 55, that's just the perfect level to be writing at because it's not really dangerously low. I can go for a half hour without thinking about it. Um, but I'm also still inside the dream and just not waking up and not bothering to make any sense. And
Now, do you push the envelope in other ways besides your risking your health?
uh, uh, well, by not sending things out efficiently, that's pushing the envelope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm a loser poet, So,
Well, you've had a lot of things happen. Obviously, you just described all these things that happened to you and the world since you last were more of a prolific writer. So how has the changes around you affected what comes out in your poems?
oh yeah, well yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was, during those 20 years, I wrote like two poems a year or something, but currently I write like uh, 20 or 30 a month, which is way too many, and a lot of them are bad. But as far as what current influences, is that what you were saying? Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah,
I was
sure.
talking more about like the things that have happened to your life, you said you stopped for 20 years. The difference in the world and the difference in your life, how has it affected what comes out in your poems?
Oh, sure, sure. Well, when I was younger, I sort of knew I was a bit of an idiot. There's a lot of autism in the family, and I have, that as sort of a thing. And I always thought, well, when I'm old, I'll know more. And I also read Walt Whitman talking about how he was going along, and waiting for his blood to boil, and that eventually it did, and that was, and it's really sort of like more like boiling blood than like doing much consciously. It's just sort of taking a lot in and trying not to reduce it. Um, and of course, I've been writing, trying to engage like topics such as, you know, fascism and massacres and Gaza and things like that. The opening poem was sort of, yeah, that was kind of a shooter poem, just about craziness with you know everyone wanting to kill each other. So I have a lot of really violent poems, I guess, because as I've read more and more history, because I've been reading a lot of history too over the last 3 years, whether it's the history of the Peloponnesian Wars or uh, the 12 Caesars by Suetonius, just examples of how people are thoroughly debauched and always have been, and absolute power corrupting absolutely. And so I've been trying to reflect and engage that, but by writing on the Caesars and, with vague, overlays to current day and things like that. And
Well,
eventually I'll get it together maybe, and it'll make sense once you see a few together. A lot of people see one or two of my poems and just sort of flinch or can't quite string the beads. But who knows? Maybe it'll eventually come out as something that would be comprehensible, or
it
sort of
makes
like.
sense to me, and it's also fascinating. Question from Paul: with unique lines like "send infinities of her skin to him," does it come organically all at once, or do you, for instance, agonize over whether the word infinity is exactly what you want? I guess he's saying about.
Oh. Yeah, well, I do it as sort of like a clang echolalia free association mess. And so I probably wrote the bulk of that poem in about 15 minutes, just sort of spewing it on a page, and then revisions just throughout the day, or sometimes I post poems on Facebook, which I guess you're not supposed to do, because I like having them out there, because then I'll think, oh, people might be looking at it, I better fix it. And so then I just sort of add revisions as the day goes on, but usually minor changes. So that one, yeah, that one was just quick. Like half of them are just like tumblings. It's just I just sort of trust in the flow and it goes well. But maybe there's about half of them where I get just a quarter page or a quarter of a poem, and then I have to pull it like threads to get to where it's going next. So I do actually. Sorry. Ah, good.
Everyone's okay still.
Everyone's okay. Yeah, yeah. I'll try to turn my phone off if I'm smart enough to do that. They make it so that even if you silence your phone, the alarm will go off. So I just killed my phone, so I'm just gonna, yeah, go with
So
it.
here's some personal questions from
Yeah.
someone that's here.
Please.
Where are you located? Do you have any pets, and what's your embodiment practices? And a good thing I
Oh,
didn't, when I first saw that, I read it as embalmment practices. So I'm glad it says embodiment.
embodiment practices. Well, maybe I should start with embodiment practices, because I like not knowing what that is, but I've always thought of myself as like um, as sort of like, it's almost like I'm walking around like holding a balloon that's loosely attached to me or something. I don't really feel very embodied, and I'm also an animist. I became an animist because when I was 10, I had an extremely detailed dream where I followed directions to find a part I needed to build a robot, and it came true in 12,000 details, and it convinced me in consciousness outside of the body. So maybe that covers embodiment. And then pets, we used to have chickens, but a possum ate them all, which is very sad. We have a Labradoodle that was given to me by somebody at the Office of Public Guardian, who I've done work for via home caretaking of people with disabilities. She's like, "Oh, your home would be perfect for this Labradoodle," and she was right. It's a great dog who keeps track of us. He can tell who's on the other side of a door by like the way our footsteps fall and things like that. He's super intuitive, and I never liked dogs before meeting this dog. Really, never really liked dogs, and we have a couple cats. So that's pets. That's embodiment. Did I miss something?
Yeah, where do you live?
Oh, I live in a little monster truck hamlet called Farmington, New Hampshire, where we went in search of the biggest Victorian we could find for the least amount of money. So the Farmington is sort of a kind of a poor town, and so the property values drop off. And we were able to get our, 5,000 square foot monstrosity for relatively cheaply. And
Are you able to find other writers nearby or other poets? Is there a scene
oh,
in Farmington?
well, it's commutable to Seacoast, New Hampshire, and so there's Durham, which used to have uh, I mean still has some good writers, and Portsmouth has a lot going on, reading wise, and then Portland has great music and writing going on. I just took the kids out to see Stereo Lab a couple
Oh,
months
nice.
ago and so on. So that's and I travel out to the Meet for Tea quarterly parties in Western Mass too. So that's my geographic range, and I guess but
I also heard you have an interesting story about meeting Franz Wright. Before I know Franz from teaching and being a professor in Waltham, and you were saying that he was just hanging out. You were studying under Charles Simic, and Franz Wright was just sort of hanging out at UNH. How did you get into a conversation with Franz, and how did you get him to blurb your book?
I met him in Newmarket by accident first, not knowing who he was and he not knowing who I was, but we just sort of struck up a conversation and eventually figured out. And I didn't know I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was. And I later pieced it together and I was like, oh, I should try to meet him again. And then I was able to mention, I think to Simic that I had run into somebody who I thought was Franz Wright, and he was able to confirm it. Oh yeah, and he was sort of I think he was thinking of having something to do with UNH, or it was a long time ago. It was more well over 30 years ago, and and so we just talked. He had we I had just had a year being a little bit crazy, and I had started work as a social worker, and I was writing on people using some of the language, these people who had schizophrenia and had been at the Concord State Hospital and had been deinstitutionalized, and so we had a lot to talk about, including his brother who was very seriously mentally ill, and he had we would occasionally argue about whether it was okay to even write about people about whether it was okay really to write about people who had some sort of mental illness, and he thought I was doing it respectfully, but once or twice maybe I didn't, and we would have little fights about it, and he would go off the handle about just nothing sometimes and write 7-page hate letters, and I wish I had them. I had I streamlined my email account, and I think I lost, some of these great rants. And I did you ever have rants from him, or hear about him like flushing Tom Lux's wallet down the toilet, or whatever?
I stayed very removed and respectful to Franz, knowing that
Good
he could
idea.
go off at any time. But what
Yeah.
ended up happening was I asked for a poem of Franz in a journal that I was working on once, and he just agreed to it, which is awesome. I knew him because he was at the Somerville News Writers Festival, and we paid him to appear. That's how I first met him. And so he sent me some poems, and then he asked me to critique them. And does this line
Oh,
work?
way.
And I said, "Oh, I have that exchange somewhere on my blog." And I said, "You won the Pulitzer Prize. Like, just go with your
Yeah.
gut, basically."
Yeah.
Like,
Nice, nice. I love that about him because he was willing to. I mean, I was maybe 19, and I said, "Oh, do you want to send me a chapbook? How about that?" I put out a little chapbook of his poems back when I was maybe I was 20. I had a reproduction mania, and I was putting out little and I was I put out poems by friends, but also by Franz Wright and Russell Edson and so on in various formats, including little matchbooks, which you were kind enough to reproduce one of.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
amazing.
so,
Do you still have any matchbooks to send people or?
well, when I have them, I send them, and so I've gotten rid of, hundreds and hundreds of them. I'm gonna start manufacturing them again this winter, I think, and I never quite know how much time I actually have, so I misjudge uh, all the time. But I think I'm actually going to do it. I found some of the masters and have my little cutting board and X-Acto knife. So all I need is to be snowed in, and for my social work jobs not to be too overwhelming, and for my kids not to be too crazy. And I think I should be able to crank out, multiple dozens this winter and mail them out to friends. So that's
So
my hope.
have you thought of going more modern, maybe poems on a lighter or one of those spark clickers?
Wow, that's the best question I've been asked. Uh, uh, no, but now I have, and so yeah, the challenge has been made.
So
Uh,
for folks that might be watching this later on, this
oh,
is
great,
a matchbook book of Matt Jasper's, which is really, really awesome. And
cool.
yeah, that's really, really cool. Um, so your more experimental pieces that you read tonight reminded me of Franz Wright. Were you influenced by his work at all, or is it was just sort of coincidental?
I think it was kind of coincidence in a way, but I do like his work, and he's one of the stranger writers for me because just because of when I knew him, and the thing I have for fonts. When I read him, the font that he's writing with will be shimmering or moving slightly. I can't turn off whatever the hallucination is of reading his work, and so I guess I am really influenced because I believe in living language as an animist, and I think somehow it's sort of coming across. I think Franz really collapsed into that anonymous huge self, of the dead still alive, and wrote from it, if that makes any sense, which it doesn't.
Yeah. Oh,
But
no, I get what you're saying. And comparing France, what was it like to work with and study under Charles Simic? I mean, I like the poem about your daughter. It was very Simonesque, and I hate to just compare your poems with the two poets that you just brought up, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. I don't mind being a dwarf sitting on the shoulders of giants or whatever. With Simic, it's funny. He was really positive about me and introduced me to the writers who came through, and made a point of just going out of his way. I Grand Street briefly thought I might be dangerous, and he reassured them that I wasn't. And then they went on to publish a lot of my poems, so that was nice of him and useful. And there was some, I forgot the name of it, but there's some university award, writing award, that he made me win, and he wanted me. He would suggest things to me that I wouldn't do, and then when we talked about poetry, I realized later, I mean, I was really arrogant, and I would occasionally just tell him, uh, I would tell him I loved him when I loved him, and I always did, but there would be an occasional poem, and I'd say, stop being Charles Simic. This one is just too, and I would say things that were occasionally had that edge. And it comes back to haunt me because then when he dies, I think stop being Charles Simic is the worst thing you could ever say because I didn't want him,
the
to
path.
die, of course. But he was so generous with his time and his, I mean, just to look at him, you would almost burst into laughter just because of how complex and funny and multi-layered his take was on everything. And then having said that, he could sometimes have a sort of a narrow range of what he could see. I mean, he could see a lot. And I love his translations. I love, everything. But there would be examples of, I don't know, there would be a workshop and he'd be looking at someone's poem, and you could tell it just wasn't sinking in. So he wasn't perfect, but he was incredible and generous and funny and so on. Uh, but there was another professor there named McKeel McBride who I was more aligned with, I guess.
Yeah. So Dave from Hill Street has a question for you. First, the question is, what's the secret of your groovy hairdo? And second, what role does reading others' poetry play in your writing?
Uh, the hairdo is that I had a long day and I thought I combed it on my way here. And then I was thinking, well, maybe if I leave the light off, they won't notice. I was going to read my flashlight because I couldn't find a brush because I have, 7 kids and 4 of them still live here. Four, five. No, four. Yeah, it varies. But yeah, they always steal stuff from me. I can't find any cell phone charging cords. You can't find any brushes. And sometimes they'll go after things like their, certain bowls, you can't find, or face cloths, Uh, so that's the hairdo. And then
Okay.
writers, I try to read uh, just everything that I can run into. I sort of started reading a lot during the pre-internet sort of small press. Everybody had a photocopier and, early layout, and so the 90s, I would read a lot of zines and small zines, and I still am more comfortable with smaller magazines, and I tend to avoid some of the larger ones, but I'm trying to acquaint myself with what's out there again. I used to just read and get mad at, Poetry Magazine or something like that, and I think I was just too, young and ego involved, of course, I'm just like that's not the way to do it, and so I would, cultivate lists of poet enemies and things like that. But I'm much more happy and have a wider range of what I like and what I read now. And so uh, I'm almost always at a loss when somebody asks me, what I'm reading lately. But if, of course, all the classics and you know Blake and Keats and Dickinson and Whitman, but a lot of contemporaries uh, who you'd all know, and then other people uh, like my like McKeel McBride, people who have a few books out, but somehow manage to stay hidden, and then I consider myself a Suttonist because of yeah, Virginia,
Virginia
um,
Sutton. Yeah.
Virginia Sutton, and I like her books a lot. I like it when people um, are sort of open books, and she also has written a lot on uh, mental illness and institutional care in the country, as has Dana Henry Martin, who's another writer who's sort of in similar trenches, uh, and who can be frighteningly coherent about it. I mean, just wonderfully knowledgeable about current issues in ways that I'm not, and so I benefit from hearing people like that speak.
Okay. So, is Moth Moon still available? And if and how long will people need to wait to hear some of your wonderful poetry? Here's a
You can get
I
it
was
on
gonna,
Amazon. People get rid of it all the time, and
people get rid of it. Nice.
yeah. So, or if
That's what it looks like.
somebody writes to me, I'll send them a free copy, and you
It
can.
looks like it's also still on BlazeVox Books.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it was funny that just sort of it took me about a week of thinking that I should make a book to get that done, just because he was really accessible and easy to approach, and then I just had the idea one week, and then like asked for blurbs the next week, and then sort of randomly threw a bunch of it wasn't a long process, but I'd like to get something else together. I'm trying to go through about 300 poems to make about 70 or 80 work as a manuscript currently. So who knows? That'll take another 3 or 4 years. And
Oh, I recommend you get it out quick. It's good
okay.
stuff,
Well,
man. Your
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
is so
Before,
good.
yeah. Thanks.
I
Yeah.
like the No Journal. You can also find a collection of bad poetry, which there are so many good poets. This was put out years ago, and it looks like a zine like Blake Butler and Elisa Gabbert, who is still around producing and doing wonderful stuff. So anyway, Matt, thank you so much for being with us. And if you're watching the stream, like I always say, and you want to do the open mic, come on in. You can
Great.
use the link and come in. Matt, Thanks again.
Thanks. Looking forward to the open.